In the early morning hours of the 15th day, the researchers standing outside Chamber 76 didn't hear screaming. They didn't hear the frantic scratching of fingernails against reinforced steel that had kept them awake for the last week. They heard nothing. Absolute, suffocating silence. Worried that the 5 political prisoners inside had died, ruining years of classified Soviet research, the lead scientist grabbed the intercom. His voice trembled as he announced they were opening the doors to service the oxygen scrubbers. He promised them their freedom if they cooperated. A few seconds of static hissed through the speakers. Then a voice came back. It didn't sound human. It sounded like dry leaves skittering across a grave. The voice said, "We no longer want to be freed." When the doors finally groaned open and the heavy stimulant gas cleared, the Spetsnaz soldiers sent in to retrieve the subjects didn't find 5 men. They found a scene so biologically impossible, so fundamentally wrong, that 3 of those soldiers would later refuse to speak for the rest of their lives. Today, we're looking at what really happened inside the most infamous sealed room in history. It was 1947. The Soviet Union was obsessed with finding an edge in the Cold War. They wanted a soldier who didn't need to rest. A man who could march for weeks without a wink of sleep. They selected 5 subjects. These weren't volunteers, they were enemies of the state. Political prisoners told they'd be granted a full pardon if they could stay awake for 30 days. To a man facing a lifetime in a Siberian gulag, a month of insomnia sounded like a gift. They were placed in a sealed environment where their oxygen was strictly monitored, and a specialized stimulant gas, let's call it the Nikolaev gas, was pumped in through the vents. At first, it worked perfectly. But there was one variable the scientists hadn't accounted for. What happens to the human mind when the off switch is physically removed? For the first 5 days, everything was fine. The men talked about their pasts, their families, their crimes. The researchers watched through the thick glass portholes, taking notes. But as they crossed into day 6, the tone shifted. The conversation stopped. Instead, the subjects began to whisper, not to each other, but to the microphones. They started betraying one another, whispering secrets about their fellow captives, hoping to win favor with the silent observers behind the glass. It was as if the gas was peeling back the layers of their social masks, revealing something jagged underneath. By day 9, the first one broke. For 3 hours straight, one man ran the length of the chamber screaming at the top of his lungs. He didn't stop until his vocal cords literally shredded in his throat. The most unsettling part? The other 4 prisoners didn't even look at him. They just kept whispering to the microphones. Then the second man started screaming. But the others? They did something worse. They took the books they had been given for entertainment, smeared the pages with their own excrement, and plastered them over the observation windows. Suddenly, the scientists were blind. And then, the screaming stopped. For the next 3 days, the monitors showed the subjects were still alive. They were consuming oxygen at levels that suggested heavy physical exertion. But there wasn't a sound. The researchers were terrified. On the 14th day, they did the one thing they were strictly forbidden to do. They decided to turn off the gas and open the chamber. When the fresh air hit the room, a chorus of voices began to wail. Not for help. They were begging for the gas to be turned back on. When the soldiers finally breached the room, the smell hit them first. It was a copper-heavy stench of old blood and stagnant water. The floor was covered in 4 inches of a dark, murky liquid. It wasn't just water. It was a slurry of blood, bile, and pieces of flesh. The subjects had stopped eating the rations provided to them on day 5. As the soldiers shone their flashlights into the corners, they realized why. The men had been eating themselves. one subject had his rib cage torn open. His lungs still pulsing behind his ribs like gray, wet sponges. He was still alive. He was smiling. They had ripped the skin from their own abdomens. Their digestive systems were visible, working in real time, processing the very flesh they had torn from their own limbs. When the soldiers tried to remove them, the prisoners fought back with a strength that defied physics. They weren't just resisting, they were possessed by a frantic, primal need to stay in that room. One soldier had his throat ripped out by a subject's bare teeth. Another was disemboweled by a fingernail that had been sharpened to a point. In the struggle, one subject was mortally wounded. His spleen ruptured. He bled out on the floor, but even as his heart stopped, he continued to scream "more" for 3 minutes until his brain finally went dark. The remaining 3 subjects were restrained and moved to a medical facility. They didn't need morphine. They didn't feel pain. They just laughed. A wet, rattling laugh that made the doctor's skin crawl. When the lead researcher, a man who had spent his life serving the Soviet machine, looked the last surviving subject in the eye, he asked, "What are you?" The subject smiled. "Have you forgotten so easily?" The man whispered. "We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind." We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal sleep where we cannot tread. The researcher didn't say a word. He drew his pistol and shot the subject through the heart. As the man's life faded, his last breath carried a final, flickering sentence. "So, nearly free." The Soviet government officially scrubbed the records of Experiment 76. To the world, those 5 men never existed. But the question remains, was it the gas that turned them into monsters? Or did the gas simply stop them from sleeping, finally giving the monster inside every human being enough time to claw its way out? If you find yourself staring at the ceiling tonight, unable to drift off, just remember, there's a reason your brain forces you to sleep. Maybe it's not for your rest, maybe it's for your protection.